Hello, everyone. Welcome to theory lesson number 2. I hope you all had a chance to look at the first video of the first lesson, which covered some scales and basic triads. And I hope you understood it. If you had a good grasp of that, it's time to move forward with this next lesson. If you'd like to review that, go ahead and take back and watch that first video again, so that we're really clear, especially about triads, so that everybody is very clear that there are 4 different types of triads: major triad, minor triad, augmented triad, and diminished triad, and the spelling of each one. And then we can push forward with this. What we're going to talk about today is something called functional harmony. Now, functional harmony is about the way chords function in chord progressions. And if you've ever heard musicians talk about 1 chords or 4 chords or 5 chords or a 2-5-1 progression or something like that, what they're referring to is functional harmony, the way chords relate to each other in different keys. If you're aware of this particular thing, this will be a review for you today. If you've never discussed this before, this is kind of a game breaker. It will change the way you look at music in the future, and it's kind of an exciting next step in the study of music and harmony. In order to start with this, we begin with something called the harmonized scale. Now, this is a major scale that just goes to the 7th note, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And we're leaving out this because I'm just going to have one of each of the notes as I harmonize this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build a triad on each of the notes of this scale, and I'm going to use the notes that are in the scale. So I'm going to use all the natural notes, and I will build a triad on each of the notes. So C, E, G, D, F, A. E, G, B, F, A, C, G, B, D, A, C, E, and B, D, F. Each one of those is a triad. Fill this in just a little bit here. Now, there's a name for these triads. They are called the diatonic triads of the key of C. Now, the word diatonic means in the key. So if I'm in the key of C, the note C is diatonic to C. D is diatonic. G is diatonic. G sharp is not diatonic to the key of C. B flat is not diatonic to the key of C. So if I create chords that all contain the notes that are in the key of C, they are the diatonic triads of C major. Now, I could do this in every key, and in fact, at some point, you might want to do this in every key so that you will see what the different diatonic triads are in the key of G or the key of B flat. But today we will discuss only the diatonic triads of the key of C major. Okay, these are the keys that the chords that naturally occur in this key by using these particular notes, by harmonizing the scale. So let me play each one of these. Here's the first one, C, E, G, D, F, A, E, G, B, F, A, C, G, B, D, E, C, E, B, D, F. Okay, now let's take a look at the quality of each one of these chords. The first one, C, E, G, is 1, 3, 5 of a C major scale. Therefore, this is a C major triad. And as we mentioned in the last lesson, a capital letter for the root of the chord will give you the chord symbol for the major triad. Now this one, D, F, A, is not a major triad. It's a D triad. But if this were an F sharp, that would be a D major triad. Since it's not, it's a D, F, A, which is a 1 lowered third, 5th, or 1 flat third, 5th. This is a D minor triad. Next, we have E, G, B. If this were a G sharp, this would be an E major triad, but it's an E natural, Therefore, it's a lowered third. This is a minor triad. FAC is 1-3-5 of an F major scale. That is an F major triad. GBD is 1-3-5 of a G major triad. That is a, so that of a major scale, that's a G major triad. ACE, if this were a C sharp, that would be a major triad, but it's not. It's an A natural, so this is an A minor triad. And then finally, BDF, if I were in the key of B, this would be a D sharp, this would be an F sharp. Because it's an F natural and a D natural, that's a lowered third and a lowered fifth. That is a diminished triad. So these are the diatonic triads of the key of C major. Let me play them again for you. C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and then B diminished. Okay, and so these are the only triads you can create using the key signature of C major, which is no flats and sharps. Again, the diatonic triads of C major. Now, here's where functional harmony comes in. If I were to do this same thing in the key of F, using one flat, I would come up with the same pattern: major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. If I were to do this for the key of G, one sharp, I would come up with the same thing: G major, A minor, B minor, C major, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In each case, every scale is identical, it just has a different starting point. So every major scale has the same patterns in it. And so therefore, if I build a diatonic set of triads on the chords of a particular key, I'm going to come up with the same pattern every single time. And that's what functional harmony is about, is pointing out that each of these has a particular relationship that we find in every key. We use Roman numerals to define the chords of every key in this particular way. We use uppercase Roman numerals for major chords and then lowercase for the other ones. In the case of this one, the C major triad, I call it the one chord. Okay, the one chord means it is the first chord of the key of C. The four chord is called, or excuse me, the F chord is called the four chord. I used a capital Roman numeral for that. The five chord is G. So if I had a progression that went C, F, G, C, that would be 1, 4, 5, 1 in the key of C. If I had F, G, C, that would be 4, 5, 1 in the key of C. G, F, C would be 5, 4, 1 in the key of C. And the nice thing about that is that once I figure that out for the key of C, I can put that into any other key. And that progression maintains its integrity, but just goes into a different key. Now, in the case of these chords here, the minor chords, we use lowercase. And for the diminished chord, we use a lowercase with a little circle or a little degree sign after it. These are the diatonic triads of the key of C with Roman numeral analysis pointed to them. Therefore, I can say that in the key of C, the one chord is a C major chord. The two chord is D minor. The three chord is E minor. The four chord is F major. The five chord is G major. The sixth chord is A minor, and the seventh chord is B diminished. So when musicians talk about a 2-5-1 progression in the key of C, that would be D minor, G, C. 4-5-1 would be F, G, C, and so forth. And then you can change keys very easily. Let's say you have a piece of music that is in the key of C. You would like to change it to a different key but maintain the same progression. you start thinking in terms of these numbers, and you can change keys very easily. And musicians all the time will say, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1, and B flat, and everybody knows what that is because they understand the relationship between those notes of the key. Okay, so this, again, the diatonic triads at the key of C major, and I've ascribed Roman numerals to each one of these. Now, here's the thing. Are all of these chords identical? Of course not. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the relationship of all of the chords that are found in this particular key or in any key. And to do that, I want to introduce 3 terms to you. One of them is the term tonic. One of them is the term dominant. And the other one is the term subdominant. Now, the term tonic refers to the tonic chord, which is the 1 chord. The dominant refers to the 5 chord, and subdominant refers to the 4 chord. But there's a larger sense of this that has to do with how these chords function in a key. Specifically, a tonic chord is a chord of resolution. Relatively speaking, it's a chord that feels resolved, feels like if you stop on that chord, the ear doesn't feel like you need to move forward. A dominant chord is a chord of tension. And a subdominant chord, for lack of a better word, is a kind of a transition. And we find that in a lot of music, we move from tonic to, there's some music that does that, but a lot of times we move from tonic to subdominant to dominant and back to tonic, which means we move from resolution, preparation, or kind of moving forward to tension and then back to resolution. And if I play each one of these for you, you can hear what I mean by that. I'm going to play a 1, 4, 5, and then back to 1. The 1 will feel, your ear will feel like that's kind of resolved, like we were talking about in the last lesson, the kind of the tonic is the resolution. This is kind of moving forward, right? This is kind of transition, if you will. Then there's a feeling of tension here, and then we're back to this, okay? So let me just mark these actually here. The 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. This one is tonic. This one is subdominant. And this one is dominant. Tonic, subdominant, dominant. And they move generally in that direction, not always, but in that direction. And let me play these for you, and you'll hear how the tension and resolution works. So here's C, F, G, back to C. So once again, here's C, F, there's the G, that's 5. Now feel how there's a sense of kind of tension to that, right? And now resolution. So by setting up kind of a relationship between these 3 chords, we give them each a particular function. If I were just to go play a G chord out of the blue, it wouldn't have that effect. But by putting it into a chord progression, musical sentence, if you will, what we have is a situation where now the G chord has a dominant function, and your ear feels like you want to hear it resolved to the 1. And this is what we call functional harmony. Once again, I will play 1, 4, 5, and then 1. What you'll hear is resolution, transition, tension, resolution. And that's how chord progressions work. Virtually every chord in a chord progression can be thought of in terms of tonic, subdominant, dominant, and then back to tonic. So when we create chord progressions, we create this sort of dynamic movement of tension and resolution, and it really creates a lot of energy in a chord progression. And understanding that energy is very important. Now, what about these other chords here? The 2 chord, the 3 chord, the 6 chord, those are the minor chords. Notice that the ones that I started out with were all major chords. No, there's not a coincidence there. C, F, and G are very closely related to one another, and they're all major chords in the key of C. D minor, E minor, and A minor, and B diminished are very useful chords, and we want to be able to use them, but we also want to be able to kind of move them around in a way that functions within this context here. To understand that, I want to talk a little bit about what's called chord substitution. In jazz, we talk about chord substitution as being a situation where if two 3-note chords share 2 notes, there is the possibility of substitution. So, for example, the D minor chord, if I look at the D minor chord, DFA contains 2 of the same notes as FA and C. So here's this chord and this chord. So here's a D minor chord, here's an F major chord. They contain 2 of the same notes, and in fact, that D minor chord is a subdominant chord. It's called a substitution. It substitutes for 4. And in fact, in jazz, we use a 2 chord even more frequently than we use a 4 chord, I would say. So the 2 chord is a subdominant chord using chord substitution. The 3 chord, now this is an interesting one. The 3 chord, and I believe the 3 chord is probably the weakest chord in the key. By weak, I mean it doesn't have a real strong sense one way or the other, but it functions as a tonic chord. It has 2 of the same notes as the C major chord. It's C, E, G, E, G, B. C major and E minor are kind of interchangeable. E minor is not as strong, but it does have a tonic function. Now, you may notice that E minor also has 2 of the notes of G major, but for reasons I can't get into today, E minor just does not work as a dominant chord. You just have to trust me on that E minor, or the 3 chord in the key of C, functions as a tonic substitute. Okay? Now, A minor, ACE, has 2 of the notes of F major, but it also has 2 of the notes, C and E, of C major. And in fact, it is a tonic substitute as well. Now, the reason it works as a tonic and not as a subdominant is that A minor is the relative minor of C major. For those of you who understand minor keys, and if not, just trust me that A minor and C major are very closely related. So A minor is also a tonic substitute. And so now we have these here, and then finally, the B diminished chord contains 2 of the notes of G major, and it is a dominant chord. It's a dominant substitute. So what that means is that every chord within a key has a particular function. It's either tonic, subdominant, or dominant. So put this here. Once again, tonic is resolution, subdominant is transition, dominant is tension. And when you hear that tension, moving back to there. Okay, so let me play some substitution type situations. We played 1, 4, 5, 1. Let me play that one more time for you. And feel the energy of the movement from resolution, transition, tension, resolution. Now let me use some substitutions here. I'm going to go, instead of 1, 4, 5, 1, I'm going to go 1, 4, 5, 6. Now, did you hear that the movement is very similar? There's the general feeling of tension resolution is similar, but the 6 is just not quite as strong as C, but it feels resolved. It has a feeling of tonicness to it, tonality, if you will. Let me try another one. I'll go 1, 4, 5, 3. And once again, as I said, that the 3 chord is probably the weakest chord in the key, but it has a sort of a temporary tonic feeling to it. What about this? Let's try 1, 2, 5, 1. That's also going to be tonic, subdominant, dominant, tonic. You get that same feeling of building of tension and then resolution of tension. We could also go 1, 4, 7, 1. So the 7, here's 5, 5, 1, here's 7, 1. So you can feel that there's a feeling of tension resolution. Once again, just understand that every chord within a key has a particular function and has this movement that comes from putting these chords into a context. The 1, 3, and 6 chords are tonic chords. The 2 and the 4 and the 2 chord are subdominant. The dominants are 5 and 7. Okay. Now, when we look at chord progressions, we can start to put the names to them. Let me go ahead and erase this and write some chord progressions. In rhythm charts in jazz tunes, we use slashes to indicate the number of beats of a particular progression. So if I write these down here, I can write a chord progression. We're going to do everything in the key of C today. Let's say we had a progression that went C, and then went F, and then went G, and then went C, like this. And we need to analyze that progression, okay? What we're going to do, whenever you analyze a chord progression on a piece of paper, what you want to do is tell what key it's in. This is the key of C, and again, we're going to do everything in the key of C today. And you put the chord symbols or the Roman numerals above. This is a 1, 4, 5, 1 progression in the key of C. Sounds like this. Now there's lots of different chord progressions. This is one common one that we find in a lot of styles of music. Let's do a couple of others. Let's do this is C, A minor, F, G. This is 1, 6, 4, 5 in the key of C. So if you want to talk about the actual chord functions in terms of more general terms, tonic, tonic substitute, subdominant, dominant. And if I stopped on this, you probably would feel like you wanted to hear something else, because if I end on the 5, it ends with a feeling of tension, right, the dominant. So let me just play that for you, and I will end on the 5. I'm pretty sure you want to hear this chord afterwards. I went back to the C chord. I resolved it for you. So Tonic, tonic, substitute, subdominant, dominant. Now this progression here is something called ice cream changes. Okay, changes are chord changes. So these are chord changes that are referred to as ice cream changes. Now ice cream changes go back to the 1950s. And if you heard early rock and roll songs, like many songs in the 1950s, early rock and roll, were based on this chord progression. And some of the people in New York, the professional songwriters from the previous era, listened to this music and kind of looked down at it as being kids' music. And they said it sounded like ice cream parlor music. And so they called it ice cream changes. It was not really a compliment. It was more kind of a diss, if you will. But this became called 1, 6, 4, 5 became called ice cream changes. And there's many songs that use this particular chord progression. Now today, if you listen to pop music today, you'll find that there's another progression that is very common. So in the key of C. I call it frozen yogurt changes. You won't find that on the internet, but if you Google ice cream changes, you'll get a description of that. I don't think you would find anything under frozen yogurt changes. This is 1, 5, 6, 4. It's a very different sound. And then it goes back. You may have heard that many times in pop music today. In fact, if you're interested, go to YouTube and type in 4 chords, Axis of Awesome. There's a whole series of different versions of it. Axis of Awesome is a group from Australia, and they've done an entire video and presentation. They do it in live performances for a number of years. And they play 50 or 60 different songs, contemporary songs, whether it's, everything, Taylor Swift, Lady Gaga, and so on and so forth. People who have used this progression. It's a very common progression in today's popular music. 1, 5, 6, 4. Okay, it's different than the 1, 6, 4, 5, but it's also something that is quite commonly used. Let's do 1 or 2 more progressions in the key of C. I started out on C, and then I went D minor, E minor, F, and then G. This is something called a line progression, which just goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I ended on the 5, and as you can hear, there's a good deal of tension that your ear wants it to go back. Once again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now there are many chord progressions that we can look at, and tomorrow, at the next lesson, we'll look at a few different ones. The next lesson, we're actually going to start to introduce some bigger chords than triads. We're going to talk about 7th chords in the next lesson. And then we will start talking about some more chord progressions that contain triads and 7th chords.